Okay, so picture this. You're emailing a colleague
Yeah.
about your upcoming trip to London.
Mm-hmm.
You've already booked your flight, made a hotel reservation,
Right.
and even scheduled that important meeting.
Okay.
This deep dive is going to give you the tools to express all those plans confidently and clearly in English using just the information you sent us.
It's amazing how a few key phrases and grammar structures
Yeah.
can really unlock that fluency and make you sound so much more natural.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the essential building blocks vocabulary.
Right.
I'm seeing trip, appointment, event, deadline, celebration, reservation, meeting, and flight
Yeah.
pop up quite a bit in your notes.
Those are really important.
It looks like you've got a busy schedule ahead.
And those are fantastic words to have in your arsenal
Yeah.
when you're talking about future plans.
Right.
What's interesting is how versatile they are. For example, trip isn't just for vacations.
Right.
It applies to your business trip to London, too.
You've also got appointment for that meeting with your colleague.
Exactly.
And I bet celebration is for that birthday dinner you mentioned planning.
Exactly. Having a strong vocabulary foundation is key. And it seems like you're well on your way.
Now let's move on to the grammar.
Okay.
Because I know you mentioned feeling a bit unsure about when to use going to versus present continuous.
Right.
I see from your notes you've encountered both.
And that's where things can get a little tricky
Yeah.
for English language learners.
Right. They seem interchangeable sometimes, but there are subtle differences in how they're used.
The lesson you set mentions going to for decisions and certainties,
Right.
but then present continuous for confirmed arrangements. Can we dig into that a bit more?
Absolutely. Going to signals an intention
Okay.
or a plan you've already decided on, like I'm going to visit that new museum while I'm in London.
Okay.
Shows you've put some thought into it. So if I'm understanding this right, going to is more about what you've decided to do.
Yeah.
Whereas present continuous, like I'm having dinner with my friend on Friday,
Right.
is for something that's already set in stone.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay?
Present continuous often involves a specific time
Yeah.
and implies that all parties have agreed.
Interesting. So it's not just about plans versus arrangements, but also the level of certainty.
Precisely. And the way you use these structures
Okay.
can subtly change the tone of your message.
Okay.
Like, I'm going to try that new restaurant.
Uh-huh.
Sounds more tentative than I'm having dinner at that new restaurant.
Ah, I see. So going to leaves a bit more wiggle room,
Exactly.
whereas present continuous makes it sound like a done deal.
Exactly. And it seems you've already grasped this intuitively.
Oh.
In some of your notes, you wrote, I'm flying to London next week,
Yeah.
using present continuous because you've already booked your flight.
That's true. I guess I was using the right structure without even realizing it. But knowing the reasoning behind it definitely helps solidify my understanding. So we've talked about the vocabulary and the grammar, but what about actually using these in real conversations? That's where I tend to get tripped up.
I understand. And that's something the lesson you shared addresses really well. It includes some role-playing exercises, which can be super helpful for practicing these structures in a more natural setting.
Oh, that's interesting. Could we try one out? I see you have some notes on my weekend plans. Maybe we can use that as a starting point.
Absolutely. So let's imagine I'm a friend asking about your upcoming weekend. I might say something like, what are you up to this weekend?
Okay. And I could respond with, well, I'm going to see that new play everyone's talking about. It's supposed to be amazing.
Perfect. You've naturally used going to express your intention now. I could follow up with something like, oh, cool. Are you going with anyone?
And I could say, actually, I'm meeting a friend for dinner beforehand, and then we're going to the play together.
Excellent. Notice how you seamlessly switch to present continuous when talking about the dinner plans, because it's a confirmed arrangement with a specific time.
Wow, I didn't even realize I was doing that. It just came out naturally. I guess all this talk about the different structures is starting to sink in.
That's the beauty of practice. The more you use these structures in conversation, the more intuitive they become. And role-playing like this can really help bridge the gap between knowing the rules and actually using them.
It's like rehearsing for a performance. The more you rehearse, the more confident you feel on stage.
Exactly. And the lesson also mentions a writing exercise where you list out your plans for the week using both going to and present continuous. Have you had a chance to try that?
I haven't yet, but it sounds like a good way to solidify everything. Maybe I could draft something quickly based on my upcoming London trip.
That's a great idea. And while you're doing that, I'll point out something else from the lesson that I found quite insightful. It mentions how the next lesson covers giving suggestions and advice in English.
Oh, that's timely. I was actually just thinking about how I need to email my colleague with some recommendations for things to do in London, do you think? Going to and present continuous play a role in that kind of communication as well. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating how these seemingly simple grammar structures can have such a big impact on how we communicate.
Absolutely. And you're right. Going to and present continuous definitely come into play when you're giving suggestions or advice.
Hmm.
Think about it.
Okay.
If you tell your colleague, you're going to love the British Museum,
Yeah.
it sounds like a pretty strong endorsement.
That's true. It's like I'm almost guaranteeing they'll have a good time, but what if I used present continuous instead?
Right.
Like, the British Museum is hosting a special exhibit on Egyptian artifacts while you're there.
That's a great example. By using present continuous, you're highlighting a specific event that might pique their interest without necessarily making a judgment call on whether they'll enjoy it or not.
So it's less about my opinion and more about providing them with relevant information to make their own decision.
Exactly. And you can see how mastering these subtle differences can really elevate your communication skills.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying you should go to Borough Market,
Right.
you could say Borough Market is bustling with amazing food stalls on the weekends. You should definitely check it out.
Wow, that does sound much more enticing. Using present continuous to paint a vivid picture really adds to the recommendation.
It's all about using the right tools for the right job. And the more you practice, the more you'll develop an intuitive sense of which structure to use in different situations.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I feel much more confident about talking about my future plans in English now.
That's fantastic to hear. Remember, language learning is a journey, not a destination. The more you explore, the more you'll discover the richness and nuances of English.
And who knows, maybe I'll even impress my colleagues with my newfound grammar skills on my London trip.
I have no doubt you will just remember to have fun with it. Language is a tool for connection and expression. So don't be afraid to experiment and find your own voice.
Thanks for guiding me through this deep dive. It's been a pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine. Happy travels. And keep practicing those future plans.